uncertainty, the pandemic, and
Yeah.
staying indoors pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, like everybody, we're making it work and making the best of it. You get kind of a reality check. One of my friends works in a hospital up in New York City, so I spoke to her yesterday, and I think then you kind of feel blessed because there's
Yeah.
people that have got a lot more going on than we do.
Yeah.
Here with our families. So
Yeah.
just hopeful that this will not be a long-term thing.
Yeah, before we get started, a thank you to all the doctors, the nurses, the military, volunteers, aides, all of them on the front line, trying to battle this pandemic as best they can. And what we're trying to do today, Jill, with this show, is to give people maybe 20 minutes and then the game later on FIFA.com to forget about the pandemic, put it in the background, at least for now. So we'll get started. Let's talk about that epic game. I remember calling that game and thinking, damn, it's too bad that this is a semifinal. It should be a final, right? It was the top two teams in the world. And what maybe a lot of people don't remember is that Germany was number one. So what was your thought process going into that game?
Well, for sure. I mean, because Germany had just played France in the quarterfinal, which was another kind of epic match. Probably one of Germany's strongest teams they've ever fielded. So, going into it, we certainly knew it was going to be a challenging game. I think the preparation for us was, obviously we did our homework as coaches, but I think the detail that we went into was, obviously how can we play to our strengths and nullify theirs? And so in truth, what we did was we looked at, what is there? They had Sausage up top. They had Anger in goal, Pop. I mean, just a high-powered team. So what we decided to do was to really kind of lock them in their own half, press them, and not give them a chance to breathe. So that was kind of the initial mindset going in. We looked at how they got in behind teams, how effective Sausage was. So then together as a staff, we kind of drew up a game plan in terms of how we would keep them in their own end.
Yeah. How do you compare where the USA was going into that game compared to Germany? Because as I think back, you both won the group, each group. Germany had to win it on goal differential because they were tied with Norway, but two great defensive teams, as great as the USA was defensively, so was Germany, but Germany had just about triple the goals for the US, so their offense was clicking with more efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of steamrolled through their group. And I think one of the things that we said, we were kind of drawn into the kind of the group of death, as it was called. And one of the things we talked about with the players was, when we come out of this group, we will kind of be battle tested and have had a hard road. And, listen, we weren't bubbling, we weren't boiling at that point. We were still simmering, I think. And so, the Germany game was probably the game that kind of just actually coming out of the backside of it, I felt very good going into the final because of the performance against Germany. But I think going in, we were finding ways to win. We were grinding it out. It was, it was not our best soccer, so to speak, but defensively we were very, very solid. We obviously had a world-class back line, world-class goalkeeper, and just found different ways to win. So, I think going in, I think the quarterfinal was China, and I think in that game, we had two players suspended, I believe, and then we played Carly in the midfield, and then coming out of that game was the decision to then, because Carly was scoring goals, was to actually play her higher up the field in the semifinal.
Yeah, you had Rapinoe and Holiday, who were suspended because of yellow cards, so that had to be tough for you, right, to make that kind of an adjustment in such a critical game. I mean, you're in the knockout stage at that point.
It was. I mean, it was, again, I don't think we, I think Alex going into the whole tournament, Alex Morgan was coming in sort of banged up, and we didn't anticipate playing her until the quarters. So it was just making kind of things work and fit. And I think when we went into that when we went to the quarterfinal, Morgan Bryan was a young player, hadn't had a ton of experience, especially at the top level. And the decision was to obviously play her in lieu of Holiday. I felt like we had some depth in the wide areas, but, in the center of the park, we played Morgan, and she played very, very well, which actually in turn then led to us the decision to push Carly higher up the field once we got Holiday back.
Let's talk about the atmosphere. I mean, the place was packed, and it was mostly USA fans. I think the Germans probably had maybe a couple thousand there, but it was about 50,000 in red, white, and blue. And because it was a dome stadium, it was so loud.
It was by far, I mean, you know, I think that the France game in 2019 was loud.
Yeah.
Different because obviously we were the minority in terms of fans, but that was the loudest game I've ever been to. I mean, it was, and from start to finish, it was edge of your seat, rocking, just loud. You know, you almost are screaming to the people on the bench because you can't really hear yourself. And that's where you know, you have to trust the preparation going into that game, because the ability to communicate actually in the flow of the match was, you know, virtually impossible. It was so loud.
Yeah.
And it was hot too, you know, it was indoors, it was on turf. So it was some tough conditions, you know, but obviously having the momentum and the excitement of the fans was instrumental.
So you always hear about pressure and how athletes respond to it. What about coaches? The U.S. hadn't won a World Cup since 1999. This was a huge game against a terrific team. I mean, if you had lost that game, your World Cup ended. No disgrace, certainly, to lose to Germany, but how much pressure does a coach and a staff put on themselves?
I think, you know, even when you take the job, you know, it's been 16 years, it's constantly in the back of your mind that, you know, we really wanted to deliver, not just for the players themselves, but, you know, for the fans, because it had been so long and we were still a dominant team internationally, you know, having come off the Olympic win in 2012, having been to the final in 11. But, you know, I think when you step into that arena, that's the kind of expectation and the pressure you understand. It is big, but I think you're conditioned to it, you're wired to it, and you expect it. So I think, you know, when we went into that game, I think that's where our preparation and our game plan was so good. I mean, we sat in a room for 4 hours, the coaches, and just really looked at, you know, how can we really thwart this potent offense of Germany? And what we actually specifically decided to do was we wanted, instead of letting them play out of the back, we wanted to actually lock the goal kicks. So, and Germany had a very specific mechanism. They didn't want Angera playing long. You know, her goal kick was probably just inside their half. And so what they would do is they would try and find the center backs. And then if you couldn't find the center backs would push up. Then they would drop their outside backs. So they had these very specific mechanics. And we looked at everything. And I remember in the meeting, the coaches meeting, we sat there and we're just like, we're gonna F this, you know, we're gonna, in terms of just, we're gonna make it very, very hard, because we knew if they couldn't get out, they're not activating sausage. And it plays into our strengths in terms of being this aggressive kind of team on the front foot. So we did. I mean, I think I had our goalkeeper coach, Graham. He actually animated the flow of the set piece in terms of how it was going to be the goal kick, meaning they're going to do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. We had everything structured. We ran through it once in training, like the layers of mechanics that they went through. And you could see it in the game that they tried to do this, we'd nullify that. Then they would drop their outside backs, we'd nullify that. And eventually what it forced Angera to do was to have to kick long. And that played right into our hands, because we won the first ball, picked up the second, and just kept the pressure on. And I actually remember after the game, someone sent me a screenshot of Angera, and her comment was, it felt like a bullet train coming at us in that first period.
Yeah.
And that was actually the visual that I showed in the pregame meeting, was two trains colliding. I mean, this is heavyweights, but we want to feel like this is, you know, just the pressure that we're going to generate is not going to let them breathe. So it was, you know, it was certainly obviously helped in terms of just the players we had on the pitch and all that. But I think that specific detail of not letting them play out really helped us.
Staying with pressure, staying with heavyweights. I remember when I did that game, Julie Johnston, now Julie Ertz, had a header that was saved by the foot of Angera.
Yes.
Alex Morgan broke in, foot saved by Angera. So you guys had the better chances for sure. But at halftime, it's still 0-0. So what's your thought going in at halftime? Do you have to make adjustments? Or are you thinking, you know, we've got this, we just need to get that first goal?
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. I mean, I think when you feel the tempo and the rhythm and where we were mentally, and you can always tell when a team comes into the locker room and you see them walk off the field, our body language was fantastic. Like, I knew the players were feeling it, felt good about that first half performance, felt like we were knocking on the door. I mean, it was, you know, it was dominant in a way. I mean, I think we truly frustrated Germany. And yeah, I mean, the decision was very easy. We didn't need to make any changes yet. Let's continue with what we were doing. And, you know, the messaging was, it's going to come. You know, the floodgates eventually are going to hopefully open and we will score the first goal. But then obviously they had the penalty kick. So
Yeah, I know. So I want to go back to the big moments in the game, and we'll start with that one, right? 59th minute, then Julie Johnston with a shoulder tug on Alex Pop.
Yep.
Down she goes. Referee says penalty kick, and she also says yellow card. You know, as you're watching this on the bench, denial of a goal scoring opportunity, the dog so rule. There is no VAR then, but are you thinking then? I'm putting you back years ago. Did we lose her? Is it a red card?
Well, listen, if I was on the receiving end of that, I've been like, absolutely, she's got to be off.
For sure, yeah.
Last defender pulls her down. You know, if the referee's calling a penalty kick, arguably you would say then it ultimately should have been a red card. You know, blessed, fortunate, whatever, some guards were looking down on us, but the reality was that, you know, she stayed in the game. And, you know, I remember, and JJ was a young player too, you know, she played in Youth World Cups, but this was her first major world tournament.
Yeah.
And I remember as quickly as possible, I was trying to get the messages in to get behind JJ because we couldn't afford to lose her, you know, mentally in terms of that's a big moment for a young player. So I remember, you know, kind of when it happened, I think I pulled a player over and we were just like, you know, keep JJ in it. You know, we were kind of doing this, like stay in it because, you know, she'd been doing well. And we obviously, you know, it was an unfortunate situation. She made a tough decision. But certainly I think coming out of it, I think Hope actually went over to her after the save and kind of patted her on the head or something, you know, kind of said, listen, we're okay.
All right, so let's stay with that big moment, all right? I mean, what are the odds that Sasic misses the net? I mean, forget about, I mean, you'd think you got Hope Solo in goal. She might save this, right? But Sasic at that time was leading in goals scored of the tournament. She had 6 goals and she was on fire. She had scored, as I recall, on a penalty kick in the game before and also in the shootout against France.
Yep.
And she misses wide and Solo was going the other way. So, I mean, if you dodged the bullet with Julie and no red card, that was a second bullet dodged, I would think.
For sure. I mean, you know, people sort of said to me afterwards, you know, listen, you know, did you plan that with Hope? You know, she sort of walked away from the goal just to kind of collect herself, take a moment. You know, I mean, icing the kick is pretty familiar in American sports in terms of, you know, obviously football. But, you know, no, it was something that just kind of, I think she just walked away to kind of collect and gather herself. You know, she's been doing this a long time in terms of being a goal. And certainly the longer a player has to think about where am I going to put it, you know, it plays with your head a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, you know, whatever, it certainly worked. It wasn't a planned thing on our end. It was just Hope's experience making a decision at that moment. But, yeah, I was, you know, I mean, you kind of almost the air went out of the room. It was like this gasp of like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Because, you know, Sasi's one of the most prolific goal scorers in the world. One of the best players ever to suit up for Germany and you know, obviously missed the net.
So now we fast forward. Now it's the USA's chance, right? Morgan gets fouled right inside the box or on the line. The line is part of the penalty area. I watched it last night in real time, and I think it's at least on the line. I think it's a penalty, but you know, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but it's ruled a penalty. So now your emotions change again.
Yeah, and you know, it was interesting because, you know, one of the things for Alex in that tournament is she actually drew some big fouls and some big free kicks. You know, and again, this was not a player that was totally in form. You know, she was coming off a pretty significant injury. And we just sort of encouraged her, just run at them, you know. And so throughout the tournament, that was kind of, you know, she was just a handful and forced teams to give up big moments, big fouls. And yeah, I mean, obviously from my perspective, it was in the box or on the line, but you know, at that moment, Carly was our PK taker. And, you know, and in truth, the woman is so specific, trains it. She's just wired for those moments. So when we got the penalty kick call, and you never want to go ahead of yourself, but it was that moment of like, holy crap, you know, this is, you know, I definitely felt we were going to score at that moment. And then, you know, as a coach, what you're then thinking is, okay, if we score, what's the next, you know, decision you make? You don't even almost focus on the penalty kick itself. It's like, what's going to be our decisions, left or right, in terms of how we manage the game immediately after that moment. So, yeah, it went in and it was pure euphoria. But, you know, we've been in soccer so long, it was like, holy crap, this is not over.
Yeah.
It's close to being over.
Yeah, that's a weird game. When I see two teams that are that good or that great, I always think, that first goal is so important. And going into that game, I remember thinking, U.S. will win this. But if Germany scores first, who knows, right? Because they were as good as the U.S. was defensively, right? But, Carly scores there, place goes crazy. And I'm thinking, this is probably good enough, but Germany still has all these weapons. And it was such a strange game, right, with all the calls that went the USA's way and the missed penalty kick and all that. But now you go to the bench, you bring in Kelly O'Hara, and I always think about this when I see, regardless of the league, how coaches must feel when they make a change and that player has an immediate impact. So what was your instruction to O'Hara at that time going in? What was she supposed to do? And then we'll talk about what she did.
Yeah, well, just some backstory on that decision. It was, as a coach, when the starters play in a match, the next day the players don't get a lot of minutes, go out and actually train. And Kelly was a starter in 11, if you remember, and in 15 had a different role. And I would go out to these trainings where, the starting group were essentially, back at the hotel doing rehab and recovery. And I remember she was just bringing it. Like, she was amazing in these trainings, like just crushing it. And I was so impressed with just her mental fortitude, her attitude. Here's someone that could have kind of stuck their head down and, tail between the legs and pouted. She brought it every single day. So in the game, I just remembered the energy she had in those trainings. And at that point, you needed someone that, the beauty of Kelly is she's got this defensive kick-ass presence, but also loves to go forward. So she really is her profile is a two-way player. And the decision was we weren't going to change the back line. We were actually going to put her in a midfield spot where she could help back defensively because she's got that mentality, and also try and, get forward and get crosses off. So I remember talking to Tony, we were like, we got to make a sub, we got to make a sub. And we had a couple of decisions. And I remember just saying, we need Kelly. I think I said we need someone with a badass attitude. And Kelly knows that, because we just needed that attitude at that moment. And she come in, I think her information was, work back, help out defensively, get forward, put them on the back foot. Kelly can run for days. So there's no, you're even thinking, you're planning on what if this potentially goes into extra time? Do you have someone with the legs who could? So no issue there. And lo and behold, she picks up this ball and just skips down the end line, cuts it back, and Carly finishes it. I mean, it was, yeah. I mean, I don't think I've lost it too many times on a sideline.
Yeah.
But I certainly remember that goal being like, holy moly, this is it.
Yeah, I watched it again last night. Lloyd sends it across. Kelly's making that run right down the middle. At that point, even though anything can happen, this is late in the game. You must know, like, in your heart, in your mind, that you've got this.
Well, at that point, a 2-0 lead that late in the game, you certainly think that you hope that it's insurmountable. But again, we've all been in some crazy games. So I think what we ended up doing, we ended up making another sub. I think we brought in Abby. We brought in Abby, and just the experience and the mentality and the player that can speak to everybody. So much of these big games is managing the games in terms of on the field and who you have in and the decisions you make. Knowing we were bringing in Abby, it was two things. One, defensively on set pieces, because Germany were fantastic on set pieces. You bring in an aerial presence that's ridiculous. So attacking wise, again, you've got a great aerial presence, and then just overall, just the leadership and the experience we had when we brought her in. So, I mean, it was a lot of moving pieces, but the right decisions, I think, on the day.
Where does that game rank for you in terms of emotion, in terms of up and down? Because that game really had everything.
It did. I think I've said this that recently, that probably my two favorite games ever was the semifinals against Germany and obviously the game against France. People are like, oh, not the World Cup finals. I'm like, no. I mean, clearly those were amazing. But in terms of decision-making and preparation and it all coming together and it being this back and forth, I think those two games stick out in my mind. So I would rank it incredibly high. And, I think the beauty of that game, I think the confidence, the energy, again, we weren't weren't limping towards the semifinal, but we hadn't really fired on all cylinders, and that game kind of ignited that. And so I think we felt very good going into the final against Japan, just where we were in terms of, you know, health-wise. We had everybody healthy. We had, you know, obviously the energy and the excitement of beating a very good opponent in Germany. So I felt good going into the final, having come off that performance.
Yeah. You know, as we wrap things up, Jill, when do you start to think about that final? I mean, is it immediate? I mean, I know before, I should take this back a little bit. You're always thinking ahead, you know, what happens if, like player rotation, all that stuff. So your main focus is on the next game coming up, but you also have, you know, one eye towards the future. But when do you actually enjoy that win over Germany? And then when do you start, hey, let's look at tape?
I think for the players, you tell them just to kind of exhale and enjoy it. The staff, no way. It goes into full mode. And, you know, not just the technical staff. I mean, the medical staff they're busting it. They're up till 3 a.m., you know, flushing legs, doing massages, doing treatments. And in terms of the technical staff, yeah, I mean, as soon as we get on the bus, we have the game. And, you know, immediately we're starting to plan and prepare, because, you know, in those tournament windows, it is a pretty short turnaround, because you want to do two things. You want to unpack the game you just played, because you want to take from that things that will help you in the final. We'd obviously had our scouts there. They did a remarkable job in terms of giving us information, but you want your own eyes also on Japan. So it's a matter of, in that 24-hour window, trying to decompress the game we just played with the players, start to layer and take things that you need from that game going into the next game. So yeah, I mean, you don't really enjoy it until it's like, in truth, you probably don't unwind until it's like a week after the final, right? But no, I think almost immediately we were dead set on the next challenge at hand. And, you know, obviously Japan, it was such a big game because it was the team from the 2011 final.
This was such a great game. Thanks for doing this. But before we go, give our viewers an opportunity to know what you're doing. You know, everyone was saying when you left U.S. Soccer, nobody knew what the next job was going to be. We're still in that mode, I guess. But what are you doing to keep up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still actually, you know, working with the federation. So I've been, you know, I went to talk to the pro license group. I've done some coaching education. You know, I was talked to the state coaches in Wisconsin. So still staying connected in terms of the ambassador role. You know, where we are right now, just socially as a world and a country, it's not something I'm planning, you know, long term. I mean, right now it's kind of, you know, help people around you, make sure your parents are all right and that kind of thing. So I haven't, you know, do I miss it? I'm like teach my daughter how to drive. So, you know, I'm like, you just go back into that teaching mode of like, you know.
I remember doing that with my daughters.
So I haven't really thought beyond that. And now we're in such a time where you just don't know, you know, which way things unfold at this moment and how soon we will return to kind of quote unquote a normal life, that I haven't given it a whole lot of thought. So, but we'll see. Yeah. I mean, it's been a fun ride, but I still don't think I'm done.
Yeah, no, I doubt it. Thanks for joining us. Be well, be smart, be safe. And for those that want to watch this game, it was one of the best games that I can remember. U.S. Women's National Team taking on Germany, 2015 Women's World Cup semifinal. Go to FIFA.com. You can watch it all.